Yeah. Can you try?
Hopefully.
Still nothing. Just checking.
I think I can see 41, so I'll pretend, but can you just text? Okay. Amazing. Thanks, team. Okay. Bye.
Thanks, bye.
Hi, everyone. We're just having some technical issues, but we have resolved them. It's amazing to be here. We are 1 minute into 7, so we're just going to give a couple of minutes for people to join because we can see more and more people are coming in. Hopefully you can see in the chat that we have a Slido that will be used for our questions. So we're going to use that. I'm really excited to have Tom here. So thank you, Tom. Tom has just had the, it'll be picking it up, yeah. Team, can you just make sure you're hearing us okay? Can you text me if you're not? Yeah, so we don't have to record, so it's fine. You can just unpress that. It's all good. Perfect. Sorry, I should have given you better instruction than that. Tom and I have been recording some content that's been really great. He's also had a chaotic dinner with my family. So thank you for that. What we're going to do tonight is we're going to spend the next hour just talking about a topic that both of us are really passionate about, but Tom has hugely valuable expertise in, which is how do we better support kids in the classroom? And so thinking about that as an anchoring point. And we'll spend the first 30 minutes, I think, just you and I having a chat about some of the amazing stuff that I've learned from you over the years. And then we'll cut to some questions. Okay, beautiful. Okay, so let's formally kick it off. I would like to acknowledge the land that we're on tonight. So Tom's kindly come to my place, which is Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and pay respect to elders past, present and emerging. It's a beautiful chance for us to reflect about how we can combine powers and think about all the amazing people that are in the community that are supporting kids, whether they're educators or caregivers. Those are, as you and I both believe, the most important professionals that are out there are the educators that are around our kids. For those who don't know Tom, which would amaze me, probably someone who also doesn't like being called doctor, but Dr. Tom Brunzell. And I've been very fortunate, Tom, to have you as a wise friend who's guided me for many years now. I have admired your work long before I met you, but you have a background as a teacher, and you have been doing that for a very long time. You've been in Australia for 15 years doing it. You are also a researcher, so you are someone that shares a similar thing with me of how do we actually bring the real science into the real world. And you've published many papers. You've also written 2 books, which are there that we'll share with the community as well. But you're also the director of the Berry Street Education Model. And I know that you're not very good at talking about how great you are, but hopefully you'll be more comfortable speaking about how amazing your team is. And for those who don't know, you probably have one of the most powerful, most important, most evidence-informed frameworks that goes around school communities, entire school communities, but also educators. And there's lots of different ways that you and your team support individual educators that are out there trying to have a skill set that better meets the needs of the kids, or entire school communities that are trying to proactively build environments that allow all the kids within them to thrive. Would that be, how's that for what your team does? And
that's a very generous introduction. Thank you, Billy, and it's great to be here.
Yes, yeah. Well, I guess to kick it off, Tom, one thing that I think that you talk about a lot, which is how we need to think about developmentally appropriately ways to support kids in school environments. And I wonder if you can speak more to that, especially from the perspective of we're trying to get them towards success, especially academically, but we need to go through these other bits first. And I wonder if you feel comfortable explaining what you mean by that.
Sure thing. I mean, I was trained as a teacher, as you introduced. And when I was becoming a teacher, like so many hardworking teachers out there, we were told to think about healthy child development. We were told to consider the ages and stages of the children and young people in front of us. But it takes some experience as a teacher to realize the people in front of me are not population averages. In fact, when I am a teacher and I'm standing in front of a room of 25 other people, often littler people, I have to realize each person has their own strengths and their own needs for learning. And I'm not just talking about students who struggle, but every single student who walks into a school, they have strengths, they have needs. And so it takes a lot of experience for teachers to realize, whoa, I've got some students who are absolutely meeting age typical benchmarks. And I get nervous even saying those kinds of words because we know those are population averages. We have students that need the push and are high flying in some of the areas of study. We also have students who absolutely need schools to do better because all of the special needs that they have may not be being met in healthy ways right now. So we think about all of those students at once.
Yeah, and I want to come back to your what does that actually look like with strengths, but just because you ended on that kind of needs not being met, and are you talking about safety?
I'm talking about both psychological safety and physical safety.
Yeah.
And of course, many of us know Maslow's and other developmental hierarchies, but I think the advent of understanding that stress in our bodies is often nonverbal. In fact, I want our listeners to remember that the next time we're in front of a stressed child or a stressed other adult or a stressed person at your work, that they may be saying escalated things, or they may be saying very unhelpful things. And I'll put that in inverted commas. I mean, it can feel very, very messy at times. But I also know that it's useful for us to consider that's stressed behavior. And when we are stressed as human beings, it is difficult to find our language. It's difficult to meet our needs in healthy ways. And that's when we'll do whatever it takes just to, what I like saying to teachers, is the kid is staying upright. The kid is trying not to leave the classroom. The kid is trying to engage, and they just don't have avenues of communication or maybe regulation in their body yet.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, you guys do this amazing work where you actually build that in, like what you talk about rhythmically, and you build that in predictable ways that the kids know that check-in and scaffolding and support's going to be there. And I wonder if you feel comfortable explaining that a bit more about what does that actually look like in a school community where kids feel like they will proactively be, checked in with for how they are going in terms of their readiness to learn.
Yeah, and we've been talking for many years now, Billy, you and I, around what do classrooms need to be, and what should parents and carers be advocating for with their school? So that's sort of been front of mind as I've been preparing for our conversation tonight. So with that in mind as a helpful frame, I want us to consider that healthy classrooms, like healthy spaces for all of us human beings, are rhythmic spaces. They're spaces of predictability, so we can be free to do what we want to do, which is be creative, be innovative in our thinking, or to learn new things. And what our research shows is that unpredictable environments feel risky to us as human beings. So you dropped me a nice breadcrumb a second ago around routines. We think so much about healthy classrooms as having healthy rhythms. Like, I love thinking about a classroom breathing together, as a healthy organism, working together, breathing together, coming from outside to inside together, and then exploring things together. So if we take this rhythmic idea, what we do at Berry Street is really think intentionally that I want educators to consider every 5 minutes in the classroom, every 3 minutes of the classroom is an opportunity to set a rhythm, set a routine, and make that feel predictive for the child. So the child, again, can rest into the community and be creative and expansive in their learning.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm sure there's people out there that are thinking, well, this percentage of my kids are just dysregulated all the time. They go from 0 to 100 at the drop of a hat. Like, I work really hard to build that in, but I'm really struggling. And I wonder what your response would be to kind of those kids that are kind of have a really low sensitivity for dysregulation in environments like a classroom, and how how you would guide those educators that are trying to support them, or those parents that are advocating for them, or even struggling at home with a similar thing. How can they use what you're talking about to create that safety, predictability, rhythm? Like, what does that look like?
Sure. Well, I also want to attribute what I'm about to share in our own campuses of the Berry Street School. So if any of our listeners are in the state of Victoria in Australia, Berry Street, we have a multi-campus school across Victoria for young people who are struggling in school. And the first thing we realized is that we owe our young people opportunities to build relationships for learning in a really healthy and regular way. So we do that by thinking intentionally, like I just said, around, how do we set students up for success by having predictable greetings? So we work really hard to have our entryways, our welcome to the classroom, the way students enter. We definitely don't want robots, but we want students to, breathe in and be ready to learn. And so we want teachers to be ready to greet them, to have clear routines that lead directly to learning. And then that sort of relational rhythm continues around what we will call checking in. Now, it can be done a lot of different ways. I mean, I love seeing teachers proactively teach the students, I'm here for you. I'm going to check in with you. I'm going to start my day asking, how was your morning? Give me a big thumbs up if you're ready to learn. Give me sideways if you're not yet ready. Give me a little shaky thumb if you would like an extra check-in from me, or you would like a regulation strategy. And I know we'll talk about that a little later. But each part that we check in, and we have many, many nonverbal systems of checking in, that's sort of my first big message for our evening together, is that when we work with children and young people who are saying, my teacher doesn't listen to me, my teacher doesn't understand me, in my head, I immediately think I am never going to blame the child for saying that. It's what can we do to enhance the communication tools, both verbally and non-verbally, as just part of the way this classroom runs. So I've talked about entry routines. I've talked about checking in routines. I want to add one more while we're on this topic. I love fix-it feedback routines. So we take the word feedback and just add a little bit of a prefix to that, fix-it feedback. Because I know pragmatically there can be problems and ruptures and issues in the classroom, but I like talking about feedback and speed bumps. And so we can say, hey, we just learned something. What is some fix-it feedback we can give each other to learn better even tomorrow? How can we give each other fix-it feedback? And I love when teachers ask students, give me some fix-it feedback. How can I make the classroom feel better for us in our bodies? I might not say psychologically safe if I was talking to primary school, but I would say, how can we ensure we all feel safe in our thinking, safe in our bodies, so we can learn together? And I love it when I hear that students have regular opportunities to tell their teachers, this is how I can learn even better. And these are some things that you should know about me to keep me moving, especially when I do hit one of the speed bumps.
And it's probably a really good segue, Tom, into your regulation strategies, because I think, there'll be people out there that are struggling to know what to do to help kids that are dysregulated, regulate. Obviously, co-regulation is a big part of it, but you also talk about things that have physicality, sensory preferences, and also autonomy and choice within that. So I wonder if you're happy to speak to that a bit more, because I think that's a really cool thing that can help, obviously, kids in classrooms, but kids in homes, in sporting clubs and things like that, is how do we proactively build those strategies so that we're not on the spot trying to think of them? I wonder if you feel comfortable speaking to that.
Well, I want us all to remember the research is clear. We need to move and learn at the same time. That when maybe you and I were students way back when, I don't know about you, but I was told great students sit there for an hour, take notes, and listen to teacher. And I came of age when teachers thought that great teaching was giving really great lectures. And we know as students, we were like, this is not a great lecture. Were you told the same?
Well, I was more thinking about all the lectures that I think I give that I think are great. So, but yes, I agree with you 100%. It's this archaic model of a good student is one that behaves,
Yeah.
you know, and is disciplined and listens and is quiet and just takes everything in. I guess the world's not like that, is it?
Well, and I also just have to give a little shout out to my prior teacher self. I used to raise my voice at my students and say, stop moving, stop pulling apart that pen. And now I realize I'm moving and learning all the time as an adult. And now I realize why. So this, I have to say, this is my fidget tool that I can, you know, when I'm in meetings, when I am trying to concentrate, I keep like turning this, I'm holding a pen for those of you who can't see, but I keep turning around this pen in my hand and I keep kind of tapping my foot from time to time. And when I'm bored in a meeting or I'm bored in a lecture, or I just need to just keep myself regulated and focused, I now know as a pro that I've got to move myself. So then I think of all of the children who have come up through so many years being told to sit still or stop moving or stop fidgeting, when in fact, all of us need that movement. Now, I know that some children need specialized intervention and they need very specialized support in the classroom. And I bet one of the first protocols from our allied professionals like you is to say, give this kid a chance to build learning stamina 1 minute at a time. We're going to meet the kid where they're at. So moving and learning, what do I mean by that? I think everyone should have the opportunity to have a fidget tool, not a toy. We're very clear on that. But also, I want students to know the helpful and unhelpful way to manage such a tool. Now, you and I would agree it is unhelpful to have a fidget tool thrown across the room. Then we want teachers to be assertive and say, this is not helpful. And I often suggest to teachers who are listening, make a chart, do a lesson, a bit of action research around one's sensory preferences, as you said, around what is helpful and unhelpful to myself and other learners. I also want to add that parents and carers, you can start teaching strategies in your own home. And I have smart borrowed this from my Berry Street colleague, Sarah Forgan, who gave me this great idea that she was saying, you know what, just the other day I was in the kitchen and my own children needed a regulation strategy. So we just stopped what we did and we had a dance party in the kitchen. And I think what an excellent model of self-care that Sarah was doing, because, well, Sarah's a pro, she understands the research and she's helping lots of teachers in our work. But she also knows that we all need to take a break sometimes. And if we take a break, connect to our bodies, move together, learn together, that can reset us for the next 5 minutes, the next 10 minutes. So I certainly want everyone to consider the Sarah strategy of the improv dance party, but that is a really great lesson that I think her children and all of our children can learn and keep with them for a long time.
Yes, I'm feeling better about the almost dance party that happened during dinner with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, just 10 minutes before we started this. I also really like the idea, Tom, I wonder if you can expand on it, of this idea of building stamina. And what I suspect you're talking about is being able to be regulated in a space and succeed, as opposed to hold, mask, grit your teeth, tolerate, and just get through a window of time. You're talking more about successfully being in that environment, aren't you? And building stamina from there.
I'm going to take that baton and redefine success. I used to think success was perfect behavior, staring at teacher and doing whatever teacher said. I now understand that is not success. That is just called compliance. And that's some kind of factory model of old education. What we want as a successful learner is a learner that can know themselves and know how they can regulate and stay in the learning 5 more minutes. And at the end of that 5 minutes, they can get the teacher's support proactively and say, hey, I've hit a bit of a speed bump. Do you have any feedback for me? Or what can I do to keep on going? It also takes a gifted teacher to do those kinds of body breaks, brain breaks. We also call them positive primers in our work. We might say, hey, a brain break is connecting to your body in the middle of learning so you can renew yourself and keep that stamina going. We also like something called positive primers, which is simple. I'll dispel any kind of nomenclature mystery, that it's a priming activity that would generate genuine serotonin, dopamine, the feelings of I like myself and I like being in this place, that the body and the brain can learn more, retain more, can do better sentence sequencing and all of the higher order thinking when we're primed to feel well and do well. Now, everything that I'm saying, I want our audience to consider what we simply call a ready-to-learn plan. That's simply 3 strategies that are okay with my teacher and okay with me that I can use to regulate. Now, for some students, some children, some teenagers, that's having an individualized fidget tool. Others, it's saying, I have a drink of water on this plan. I just need a moment to collect myself, hydrate, and get back in. And if we are supporting a student with particular needs in the classroom, and it is imperative that that person has a champion on staff, somebody who knows how to support, co-regulates, who sees their strengths, we would write that person's name as part of their ready to learn plan. So that student knows there's always somebody who will listen to me and be in that champion role for me.
Yeah, it's beautiful, Tom, because it actually segues nicely into the next thing I wanted to talk to you about, which is really, you obviously know the evidence of attachment really strongly, and you have a way of translating the attachment theory, the evidence around that, and circle of security into classrooms. And I guess that is that idea of a champion, isn't it? About who is a safe, predictable relationship that these kids, like, and you're right, every kid needs to have at least one person, don't they, that's there. And that idea as well of like the safety within boundaries of that, and that being a attachment affirming or an attachment securing thing that happens of like, we're not, I don't think you're saying educators should just let kids do whatever they want because they're expressing themselves and they should all be free spirited and all those things. There is a boundaries component that helps them feel safe, doesn't it? And that they're supported. I wonder if, is that how have I explained that well in terms of how attachment can be used by educators in classrooms?
Yes, except you had me at too much freedom in the classroom. So now my brain is a little stuck, but I'm going to get there. I will say I used to be somebody who said, I've got super awesome progressive values. Every child needs to be who they are. And I agree totally. But my classrooms used to be so chaotic because I just thought, oh, I don't want to, demand my structure as a teacher and silence voices. But I realized if the classroom is chaotic, if it's a low grade party or a higher grade party, the students end up silencing each other because it becomes a race for calling out or gaining the louder voice or whatever it is. So this is my plea out there for, we want healthy structure so we can have healthy creativity. But now I'm off task. I'll get back to the, I think what you're talking about, Billy, is an attachment aware teacher is very aware of the definition of what a healthy relationship for learning even is. And you mentioned the circle of security. So I want to make sure we talk about that for a second. I am being very careful with my language because as an educator and education researcher, I'm going to speak about educators, but I think this well applies to most adults in a child's life in healthy ways. That as adults, we need to inhabit both safe haven and secure base, as the circle of security research suggests. So safe haven is being the champion, being there for the child's comfort and safety and regulation, that the child knows through the crying drama that maybe they made an unhelpful choice, but they can trust the adult who will be there for them, listen to them, and they can also trust that the adult will help organize some of those messy feelings. The other side of the relational practice of attachment-aware adults is secure base, and that's well describing when adults understand healthy boundaries for the roles that children play, both their creative play, their learning, and other roles as a helper in the classroom and beyond, that every one of those roles that the child inhabits still requires healthy boundaries. And we want to teach that when a child is disrupted the personal space of others, or they've disrupted the learning of others, that we are going to do whatever it takes to help the child repair that and restore that, not punish. Now, I want to be clear with that.
Yeah.
I am aware that the word punishment has a lot of meanings to a lot of people. And as I am following the use of language in our campuses, I will gently suggest that when we say the word punishment, that often carries with it very negative connotation of the child being left alone or isolated.
Mm-hmm.
And that is not helpful to building relational safety and relational trust. However, I do like the terms fair or natural consequences when we are using that time to build regulation, relationship, and resilience together. So the child understands when there is a timeout, and I do believe in timeouts, especially when the individual is not safe for themselves or others, that when we need a timeout, it's a time to renew, to restore, and repair. I'll add regulate too.
Well, the regulation, there's two things that I want to talk to that you mentioned there. Yeah, one is like around that idea of like organize the messy feelings that they're having, or you said it in a better way than that. And I wonder if you see co-regulation as being a way to do that, to help a kid not feel isolated in the feelings that they're struggling with.
Yeah, totally.
And that's this beautiful way, isn't it, of thinking about how do we build the capacity of educators to actually meet that need, which once again, you know, your evidence points towards how we support educators to do that. But I think you're right, it is any adult that's around a kid and what that actually looks like. I don't want to steal them off you, but you have steps that kind of go through how you do that, don't you?
Yeah, I just want to remind us all that children and teenagers are supposed to be messy. Like and I actually get a little nervous if I meet teenagers who are not a little emotionally messy. Like that becomes sometimes a concern around teenagers trying to control too much in their emotional life or expression. And that becomes a rigidity that we want to encourage students to sort of break out of some of the molds that they put themselves in. But that's a different topic. What I would also suggest, though, is emotional expression. It is naturally messy, and the child at different developmental stages is trying to push those neuronal connections, those synapses, into just messy emotion. And that's a good thing. And the child needs to understand, I am upset. I'm a little frustrated. I'm also a little embarrassed. And I am also very angry. And to pull apart those very difficult and sometimes overlapping and confusing emotions, that takes sometimes an adult level of self-knowledge that even we as adults don't always have for ourselves.
Yeah.
So that messiness is useful from, as you've said, a co-regulating presence. Somebody who's there to say, today was not your day. And I did not really appreciate your actions, but I am here for you. And it was messy. And we have to talk about some of the messiness. But I hope what I'm doing in my self role play there is to model, like, I see you and I have a love in my heart for you. And I have my best intention for you. And I know you talk a lot about this in your work, this like verbal and this nonverbal presence that you have for children, to show them, I have this thing we call unconditional positive regard for you.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's, such an important kind of way to respond, and co-regulation can guide us with that. I just want to, we're going to go into question time, because I want to, and we've got some questions coming in. So if people can please use Slido to send in questions, that would be really helpful. But I just want to start with one because it's an unusual one that I've spoken to you about before, but you actually mentioned it about 10 minutes ago. The student who's doing well, but how to elevate them beyond that. And I think it's a really interesting thing to think about, because we meet lots of kids in clinic who are, you know, getting okay grades and are academically on track, but someone is a bit suspicious that they're actually not reaching their potential in whatever success they choose to be pursuing. And I wonder if you can speak to that a little bit, because I think it is a really important group of kids that we can do better to support them.
This is my favorite topic right now, Billy. So I'm really going to try hard not to make it into a keynote in the next 10 minutes. But this is what I think a lot about these days. So we have been in a lot of ways talking about acting out. You know, that's behavior to us teachers, parents, carers, community members, acting out behavior. It's obvious. We can see it. It's escalating. We also are very concerned about another category of behaviors we might call acting in behaviors. And for some children, that is just as much of a concern than children we see acting out. Acting in is when I would just gently describe here as when a student pushes the work away, child puts head down, or teenager just sort of checks out. And you realize for some kids, they just need a break. But for this particular student, this child, this is a big deal. So I want everyone to know that we think very much about both sort of sets of behavior. I just want to drop down a little breadcrumb that's really inspiring me right now. And I have been very much focused on the impact of AI on learning and on schools and curriculum assessment and design and enactment and all the things that are about to shift in significant ways because of the technology that is like in our lives already. I want to give I'm not being paid. I want to give a little breadcrumb to anybody who's listening. I'm loving this new book by Jenny Anderson and Rebecca Winthrop called The Disengaged Teen. And based on much recent AI research and evidence, there are 4 modes that they suggest our students can be in. And so if you're listening and you have a young person in your life, you may be thinking, okay, what mode do I see in evidence right now? So we have passenger modes. These are modes where students are just letting the learning pass them by. They are doing minimal effort because they're just sort of, you know, humming along okay. But our worry around passengers in the classroom is that when they hit genuine challenge, maybe in high school, they quietly quit. They quietly say, this learning thing, it's not for me. Another mode is achiever mode. And I think this answers your question right now. That achiever mode, according to this research, are kids who are very well behaved, but they are figuring out how to game the system. Meaning they are uploading their assignments into AI, they're uploading the rubrics, they're asking AI to give them pre-marks, and then they're introducing little errors to make sure their teachers see that their work is real, in inverted commas. Our worries around achiever mode is that they are only valuing the achievement, but not pushing forward in their own learning. Now, quickly, resistor mode in this work are students who are actively driving away from the learning. And this is what I've devoted my career in research to supporting, is how do we create schools that can help people in students in resistor mode realize we care for you and we'll do whatever it takes to turn you into. And the 4th one is explorer mode. I want us to consider, how are we creating learning experiences and schools of tomorrow that are going to help our young people understand the future is there for explorers, to use technology, to find professions, and to understand ways of working together that we have no idea what's existing or how it will exist in 10 years. But it's the explorers that I found we can absolutely enhance and bolster at our own school, the Berry Street School, because these are students who have experienced a great deal of struggle in their prior educational years. But when we can tap into that thing that they really understand to explore and contribute to, that's when I know we're getting somewhere.
Yeah, it's really interesting as well, because you're making me think of the idea of like mastery and process over performance and outcome. And, you know, that's kind of what I think. I've never heard you talk about those 4 things. I was worried I was putting you on the spot a bit, but it was such a great answer. And I guess what you're articulating is that we can help people spend more time in explorer mode and spend more time valuing their energy going towards that, as opposed to achievement being something that's, less rewarding in the long term. And yeah, that's actually really helpful for a lot of kids that I meet in clinic. I'm just going to have a look at some of these questions. So here's a beautiful one.
Okay.
Our school has just implemented the Berry Street education model.
Okay.
As a parent of 2 of the nearly 800 students at the school, what would you say are some of the gentle things I can do to assist with the students and other parents at our school successfully integrating this practice into the school community? How beautiful is that?
Wow.
Because you and I talk about this off mics about like how can we support parents? Because I think you have a really nice healthy balance of like educators need to be better supported, but also parents' expectations need to be different to what they were when you and I were coming through.
Fantastic. Yes. Oh, I have tons to say, but I'll keep my answers brief. How cool would it be over time to ask a child, your child, if your child goes to a school that our team is supporting, to say, hey, so when do you all have opportunities to be a healthy group of kids together? How do you know when you're listening to each other? How do you know when you get to share together, give fix-it feedback to each other? Now, the answer to that is we teach a lot of schools how to do healthy circles. Now, I love circles as both a metaphor and a physical thing. So physically, a lot of primary schools and in secondary school, it might be pastoral time or well-being group, or, there's lots of names for this. That do the students have understanding of when they are in a circle, whether it's sitting in a circle or a metaphorical circle? Do we have chances to give feedback to the class? Let's say we had a rough time yesterday, everybody. We were pushing each other in line. We need to use our circle time to come up with democratically based solutions. Or we need to celebrate each other in circle. Or we need to give very special attention to the values of our school in this circle. But it would be awesome to ask the kind of rhythms and routines that your children experience. So we have routines at the beginning of the day. We have routines for restoration. We have routines for movement. Like I mentioned earlier, these ideas of brain breaks or movement breaks. I love it. If parents or carers listening might say, so how many chances do you have to move your body and learn at the same time? And the correct answer for me is when a student or child says, I move my body a lot, like we do singing in the morning. Then I get to use one of my fidget tools during reading. And then we have these brain breaks during maths. And then after lunch, we do breathing. And then we get to choose one of our positive primers, which might be a fun memory game or something to end the day to kind of activate ourselves and then say goodbye. Oh, finally. How cool would it be if your child says, and my teacher asks me for fix-it feedback. They ask me how I learn best. I think that's when I know our work is humming in a school.
It's really beautiful. And I think that, you're never critical. You're too kind with all of your words, Tom. But I think there might be communities out there that perhaps have a one-size-fits-all about what this looks like, might be using brain breaks punitively. I think you need a brain break. And what you're talking about is actually these are strengthening strategies that kids have autonomy about. Mm-hmm. And I know you talk a lot about recognizing the power imbalance that sits within classrooms and thinking about how do we shift that a little bit. And I guess, that's a cool way of thinking about it. I also wonder if you have anything else to say about the idea of, how does this stuff be consistent at home as well? Like, how do we have proactive partnerships with educators as caregivers that are saying, how can I help your kid, but also what's working here? Mm-hmm. What can I bring home? What can I be doing at home? Whether it's like, this is the way that we have, brain breaks or movement needs. This is what we're working on today, signaling early, catching our bodies early when we're feeling angry. That must be a part of it, do you feel like, for translating it beyond just the classroom?
I learned this in my own research a long, long time ago. So I will never, ever forget. I was in a middle years classroom, and we were helping the young people, children, well, they're middle years, so they're still kids. They were developing helpful regulation plans. Again, simple things where each student was asked to brainstorm 3 ideas that they could regulate without interrupting anyone else or distracting anyone else. And I will never forget that one of the girls in the front row, she raised her hand and said, "Can I get another piece of paper with the little thing that we had made, the little thing that you fill in?" And I said, "Oh no, yeah, of course you can have another paper. Did you make a blunder and do you want another one?" She said, "No, no, no. I just realized I could make 2 plans. I could make a ready to learn regulation plan for school, but as I was thinking of strategies for school, I kept thinking, no, those are in my home. And then I think I should just make a regulation plan for home too." And then I gave her another paper and I looked down and she had written at her home plan, "Go into mom's bedroom and turn on the TV." And they had an agreement that that was okay. Second idea was, "Go to my bedroom and count my stuffies." So that's stuffed animals for people who not who are migrants to Australia like me. And the third was, "I can go call my brother who lives in another town." So this idea of young people were telling us, once we taught them the benefit of these plans, they were being far more creative than we were. So I would encourage all of the parents and carers to think, brainstorm ideas that are okay with you, and also please use the words helpful and unhelpful. I've learned not to call something right and wrong when it comes to regulation strategies.
Yes. Yeah. And also testing things out,
Yeah,
it's
totally.
an idea of that. Beautiful. Okay. Next question. My grade 1 child has ADHD, autism, OCD, and trauma. He's highly anxious at school, rarely enters the classroom, avoids the yard, and relies on me for regulation due to a lack of support. Despite strong math skills, the current setting is overwhelming. Court orders require him at school, but I'm wondering if a specialist autism school with small classes and structured support would be a better fit. Wonder how you feel about that question. Very quickly, we get asked about this a lot in clinic, about kids changing schools to a specialist school or a special school, or staying back a year, things like that. And I think for me, this will be the last bit of advice I promise I give. But for me, one thing that's really helpful is I need to know why that place will be better, or that option will be better for that specific child. Because I think that, it's understandable leaving. And it's the same as homeschooling. Like, I think homeschooling can be a really wonderful thing for so many kids, but we need to think about how can we modify reasonably with these environments that kids are within. And you would talk a lot, Tom, about safety, and this is a child who has multiple reasons why they might not feel safe despite their academic skill set. So I wonder how you feel about this cohort of kids, which is a lot of them, and how do we think about the current school they're in and the potential there, or the need to go somewhere else?
First of all, I just want to say thank you to the question and the question asker, because I realize how much courage it takes to sort of really ask for that kind of support in a forum like this. So thank you. And also know, so much of our practice and research is really meant to help families in this situation. The question, I'll answer it in 2 ways, and I'll be as fast as I can. So the first is, the question is, what is the best setting for my child? And obviously I cannot answer that, but tonight with you.
Yeah.
But I do want to share that that's the reason why our team at Berry Street exists, in that our Berry Street education model team is specifically working with government schools, independent and faith-based schools, primary schools, early learning services, and of course secondary and into teacher ed and beyond. What we know is that the entire field has to get better at what we're doing, which is why we exist. So I want everyone to know there are great specialist schools. In fact, I do want to give another shout out, because it was just published today in the in the Journal of School Mental Health. We published something with Aspect Australia, which is one, yeah, good. I'm glad to hear your shout out there. Aspect is our country's largest autism education provider with multiple campuses across the country. So it could be that if you do some bit of your own family assessment and that feels like a great place for you, then we certainly support that. But I guess I want everyone to know that the entire field is in a renewal around these practices, around school engagement, well-being, trauma-informed education. And if you're interested in any of these topics, please check us out. But I also understand, I do want to give a bit of a strategy for this family. In these circumstances where we have little ones who are just feeling like they can't get to the next part of the playground, to the next doorway, to the next classroom, to the next intervention room, that often is because, or can be attributed to, just a real chaoticness in those transitions, that sometimes the child is meant to get from A to B on their own. Sometimes there are different education support or professionals ready to help them. But if those people are not consistent, it can feel really chaotic to the child. So something that we've had a lot of success with is when we can get the school on board to create something I'll call pass the baton being a loving term for the child, but to have a clear, predictable structure to say, somebody is going to be ready to go in the parking lot at drop off to give a big smile and a big handshake and really be the first person to greet this child. Then we want to bring this child into a safe place because the playground looks safe, but can be maybe chaotic. And so we want to get the kid into a place of maybe of their choosing or a place that feels safe to them. And we go through the day and we say, this is your day today. And these are the strategies you can use. If you feel yourself needing a strategy, then we get to the next place and the next place. And that consistency does not change things over time. But when the child learns that I'm going to see the same-ish people every day, every half hour, every hour on the hour, then the child can begin to relax into their routine. But I would love to hear if you think that is a useful strategy.
Beautiful. No, I think it's an amazing strategy because I think it even fits in well with your idea around like safe havens existing within people, but also the rhythmic nature of safe environments and just predictability and things like that. And also like what you talked about before of like that stamina build.
Yes.
About like building stamina to be in this space successfully. So it's beautiful. There's some really great questions coming through. Thanks. So thank you to everyone sending them in. How can educators, maybe, because I feel like you have a good answer for this, how can educators stick to doing what works, like restorative practice, which is beautiful, or trauma-informed approaches, when others are demanding something more punitive just because it feels like justice?
Oh, see, these questions are so good. And I'm not going to, okay. So I have to put on my bossy voice now.
Okay.
I'm not speaking to anyone here, but I'm empowering people to go to their schools. So as a teacher, I do not expect or need a child to say they're sorry to me.
Yes.
I am an adult. I hold a master's degree in education if I am a teacher in most places. And this, like, I often wonder, and in like rudely in my head, a teacher who's demanding an apology, I just keep thinking, like, what do you expect this kid to say to you that's suddenly going to land for this child? Anyway, so instead, it is far more important, instead of a forced apology, is to have a repair moment between teacher and student to say, yesterday was not our day, but these are the strategies that are okay with me, and to use that opportunity to repair, to focus on regulation, to focus on that proactive communication. Because I also know that some children stop talking to their teachers because last year's teacher, and I'm doing my air quotes, didn't listen to me. And that's when students shut down, and we know when the bullying starts up again. So that's something we're concerned about. But I also want us to remember that if we set up these structures, that over time, the child grows up, the child grows into that next phase of development where they realize, oh, that behavior I used to have isn't so cool anymore for me. And then when they grow up, they develop that capacity with repetition of the strategies and caring adults around them to realize I can relax and begin to trust the structures around me. Now, it comes with a bit of a deal. The school has to be ready with those structures, and the school has to be proactive, which is why we exist in our work at Berry Street.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and there might be one or two people that laugh at this, but I'm tempted to cut that and put it on social media as a highlight, because I recently talked about kids not being forced to say sorry, which caused a bit of attention on social media. So I won't do that to you. I've got a couple more that are wonderful. If you could speak directly to the principals or the Department of Education, what single change at the secondary school level could they make to help young people?
Is this your question or a question from the
question?
That's a good question. That's a good question, because I do get to talk to those people, and I am constantly thinking, what can we do as a system? That's a big question. I'm sorry, this was specifically secondary?
Yeah, specifically secondary.
Yeah, okay.
One single thing.
One single thing. Look, one of the big goals we have for our work is that every single young person graduates from a program or campus of their choice. And at that graduation, somebody can say, what are your strengths? And what did you learn about yourself? And on contact, the student, the graduating young adult can say, oh, I've got curiosity, I have love of learning, I have persistence, and I have the ability to regulate. I can bring those strengths to my next educational pathway or university or beyond. I will have these strengths. I will always remember I went to a high school who saw me and kept spotting my strengths and helping me use my strengths to set goals for myself. Now, that little role play I just did around like a young person knowing that there was a place who understood them and knew their strengths, on the front end, the planning end, I know how much work that takes for a school to move from a factory model of understanding young people to seeing each young person in a high school as an individual with their own hopes and dreams and needs and strengths, and to shift the mindset of so many staff members from reactive to proactive. Proactive meaning, I see this high schooler, they have these strengths. I have to remember that that is the nucleus of their identity, and I'm going to fortify that. That's my big goal for high schools.
Yeah, that's so beautiful, because I think it's, how to, I often think about those kids and I'm like, we need to keep all of them here for us, not for them. You know what I mean? Not doing this favor to kids and we're going to keep you in this environment, but actually we all benefit as a school and broader community if we can keep all these kids here and help them grow and they grow us as well. You know what I mean? I think it's like, okay, last one.
Okay.
How do you know if your child is ready to start school or might benefit from another year of kindy? And how can parents prepare early, ask the right questions, and advocate for the right school fit, especially for kids with big feelings or unique needs? It's a great question. Thinking about, and you might even talk about a bigger transitions component, because you spoke about transitions and the challenges there. But that's a really big transition question, isn't it?
It's a huge transition question. I'm going to say an answer, and then my friend Billy, you're going to end the evening with your answer too. So our team has the privilege of working across transitions. We support early learning centers transitioning into the first years of school. I know you have listeners from around the country, and everyone has a different word for that first year of school. We also support transition from primary into high school. The real fantastic thing these days is that when campuses in a community know our work well, meaning they know the kinds of research and practices we've discussed tonight, that they can do those things in an age and stage way that feels consistent from the voice and the experience of the child. So now when campuses in a community, and I'm going to call out a community very near and dear to you, my friend, in Frankston North, we've been working in that community for, now for over 5 years. And the hard work of these educators is that they now can have transition meetings for parents and carers to say, oh, you know, the same check-ins and the same regulation plans and the same ways of communicating that we had in our earlier center, the primary school is doing the same thing. So immediately we've created a predictability from the child's point of view that the adults that are about to bring them into the next phase of their schooling get it. And then I am so proud of this community. We know that the 6th grade teachers have locked arms metaphorically with the 7th grade teachers and saying, oh, these same things that we've done here in the primary, you do this at Monterey Secondary campus in the community high school. So it's pretty cool to see all of the hard work that's gone into teachers sharing a consistent practice and then really sharing that with parents and carers. But I will give it to you now.
No, well, it's interesting. So I've actually heard with you those 2 school leadership people speak from those schools that you're talking about, and they're amazing humans. I think you're right. I think there's a bit about how do we journey together as a community with these kids. I really like your point as well about like what's the experience of that child, because I think a lot of kids, you know, if we think about emotional and behavioural difficulties or sensitive kids as signalling that they're struggling a bit, it can be an important thing to think about. We need to modify something. You know, we need to think about how we can put more support in, how we can drop demand, you know, how we can think about what might be, because there's a reason, isn't there? And that's what we're actually talking about. Like, what is the reason? And there is a risk that that reason increases as the child goes up in a year level. Like, it's really interesting to think about some of the research around this, especially with girls that enter kind of early to middle high school. They really struggle because the social pressure on them. And we see, like, this is getting into a bit too much detail, we see depression rates will start increasing in teenage girls because that transition and the expectation increases, whereas their capacity hasn't lifted with it. And so I think those are kind of, really, really important bits to think about. Like, how do we think about what the experience of this kid is and then transition them through it? But yeah, what do you think?
And just one more thing to add to in response to this question is, perhaps if you feel moved to have a meeting at the next campus, that primary school, and say, tell me about some of these routines. Tell me how you bring the kids from outside to inside. Tell me what are some of the routines you have set up to communicate with children, and how do children communicate back to you about what they need. And if you hear them say some of the things that we've been talking about, that might be an indication that this is a school who is ready to meet some of those needs. And if you don't hear all those routines, you may want to encourage them to think about it, or you may want to pre-teach some of that to your child at home.
Yes, it's a beautiful note to end it on. I really encourage anyone to reach out, caregivers, educators, reaching out to think about, through Berry Street Education Model, what supports you guys have in place. There's a lot of information about what you can do to access. It's 2 amazing books that I've read that are here on shot that will, I'll share the details, but they are both amazing, and I'll share the details of them. You've written 2 books and lots more research. Tom, thank you for sharing that time with us. I could have spoken to you for hours. I've been an admirer of your work for many years and very privileged to have your support. We hope that was helpful for people. We will ask you, I can see some feedback going throughout about, we'll ask you for your feedback about the session. Hopefully it's helpful. We're just trying to think about how we can best support the community that's out there. Tom, thank you for joining us tonight, and hopefully we'll get to do much more with you and your amazing team in the future.
Yeah, thanks, Billy. Thanks, Pop Culture Parenting people.
See you, everyone. Have a lovely night.